A man being gunned down in cold blood wasn't so uncommon in a bustling little border town like Van Buren. It may not be evident now, but only a few years earlier, the main street of this turn-of-the-century town along the banks of the Arkansas River was alive with excitement. The gallery was packed full of eager residents who had come from miles around to catch their first glimpse of the newly opened Opera House. The Opera Faust was christening the stage of Van Buren's King Opera House. The wooden seats were new, the fragrance of wet paint still fresh within the walls, and the spectacle of elaborate scenery was breathtaking. At last, the magic of theater had come to sweep Van Buren citizens away to a beautiful world of fantasy and culture.
And, as of last Wednesday...
In 1898, Mr. Henry P. King, a local merchant, purchased a commercial building on the corner of Main and Fifth, known as the Wallace Block. With a penchant for the arts, Mr. King and his wife had traveled back east, taking in plays, as well as the latest rage, vaudeville, and on returning home made the decision to give Van Buren an opera house comparable to any in the East.
I have made the decision to give Van Buren an opera house, of which we can all be proud.
Now, Mr. King...
King's plan was to completely convert the old building by constructing a 3-story stage structure, complete with balcony seating, an orchestra pit, and 4 private opera boxes.
Colonel King announces his arrangement to open the Opera House this Friday. Voting contest on page 3 for your own opera box. Said to be the social event of the season. Change in the jar. Thank you very much, man. How about you? That's your name on it. Thank you very much. What about
the announcement spread like a grass fire through the river valley. In preparation for the opening event, local dressmakers and tailors worked feverishly to create the latest and fashionable gowns and evening apparel in order to transform the common folk into proper ladies and gentlemen. Some families even dipping into their savings jars to outfit their children for the occasion. After all, this wasn't just some 3-penny sideshow. It was quoted in the papers as the social event of the season. Mr. King even inaugurated a voting contest, in which the lady receiving the most votes would have at her disposal one of the prized Opera House boxes.
The lovely lady receiving the most votes will be entitled to her own private opera box, along with 3 guests. Oh, yes, the dress would be perfect. I can wear the hat with it. Yeah, she will look so pretty.
Ballots were sold for 1 cent each at various locations around Van Buren. Voting places were established at Kerr's Drug Store, Ingberg's Store, and O'Kane's Bostic & Sons. Finally, the much-anticipated opening night of October 18th had arrived. The threat of inclement weather could not have deterred those fortunate enough to have tickets from flocking to the now glowing Opera House, the unparalleled beacon of Main Street. Most drew up to the side in horse-drawn conveyances, some of which were newly purchased and others rented for the occasion, with leather and brass fittings cleaned and polished to a gleaming finish. Wrapped in furs and silks, with hair entwined with plumes and beads, the women were escorted by gentlemen strutting in newly discovered and slightly uncomfortable sophistication of tie and tails. Once inside, the patrons were greeted in a plushly carpeted foyer, with a small but sweeping staircase. As guests entered the theater, they were surrounded by glistening crystal chandeliers, modern fixtures, and heavy draperies. No detail had been left unturned, including a masterfully painted drop curtain depicting a pastoral scene of the Swiss countryside. The spectacular curtain rang up for a full house that night, as the first scene of Faust began. That glorious evening was all that King had hoped it would be. His prestige and place in the annals of Van Buren's history was firmly secured by giving to her a modern playhouse, rivaled by none.
Thank you very much.
Well done, Henry. Well done. You've certainly hit the nail on the head with this one.
Much obliged, Doctor. Much obliged. She did make Van Buren proud this evening, if I do say so myself.
Well, I did really enjoy the performance. I hope you don't mind my saying so, but I hope that you'll keep your theater solely reserved for legitimate theatrics. No need to encourage the riffraff to come over across the river with burlesque and the like. Let's keep it over on their side, where it belongs. Our job, my friend, is to keep our city, Van Buren, a beacon of decency and order.
Right you are, Doctor. Right you are.
Oh, you haven't met my Allie. Allie? Allie, Colonel King.
It's a pleasure to meet you, sir. The performance tonight was simply fascinating.
Thank you, dear. And I assume you'll be following your father's footsteps into medicine. Lord knows Van Buren could use another parchment taking care of the people.
Thank you, sir.
She's applied to all the top schools back east.
Papa,
Yes, dear.
I left my coat in the theater.
Hurry along. Let's move in. As I was saying,
After such a grand opening, King continued to bring name attractions to his opera house. Drama and farce, vaudeville and circus acts, and of course political rallies would always draw a crowd with his cultural hub. In March of 1914, a dry cleaning establishment that operated in the front of the Opera House brought tragic demise to the celebrated theater. The fire didn't gut the building, but caused enough damage to force its closure for massive repairs. After such devastation, it just didn't seem possible that the Opera House would ever reopen its doors. Beside that, times were changing, and people just weren't interested in live theater and vaudeville anymore, especially considering the phenomenon of moving pictures and talkies were born in a faraway place called Hollywood. But still, the spirit of the little opera house seemed indomitable, and it looked as if it might have an opportunity to once again become a magnet of entertainment on Main Street. The doors opened again on the Bob Burns Theater, named after one of Van Buren's hometown boys, who had managed to find some success in California's Tinseltown. Bob Burns' radio and film career gave the rest of the country a little taste of life in Arkansas, with his tales about the kinfolks back home.
Uncle Slug's up in Canada. He read a big sign that said, "Drink Canada dry," and he went up to see if he could do it.
Bazooka Bob was always accompanied by his handmade musical instrument, called a bazooka, which soon became the name of the commonly known military anti-tank weapon. Today, the restored King Opera House retains the charm of a bygone era. It's a favorite venue for local theater and music groups, dance recitals, and events. It may not feature the top-billed traveling companies and vaudeville shows as it did in the early 20th century, but still, there's just something special and unusual about this place. True, no more seam-pressed gowns draped with fur or gentlemen in coattails and top hats parading down the aisles. Except, perhaps, for one. Many visitors of King's Historical Opera House have claimed to have seen a mysterious figure lurking in the shadows of the theater. All who have encountered the apparition describe a man roaming within the walls, dressed in a pair of freshly shined black shoes and a black coat with a trailing tail. After numerous sightings, the only explanation for the figure is that it is the ghost of an actor who was murdered just down the road at the train depot in 1903. The legend follows that the young actor had fallen in love with the beautiful young daughter of the local physician, Dr. W.L. Parchman. Dr. Parchman highly disapproved of his daughter's infatuation with the dashing Tolson. Nevertheless, as the closing of the evening's performance approached, the two young lovers made secret plans to escape the confines and watchful eyes of Van Buren. Now, everyone knows that it's hard to keep a secret in a little town like this, so when word reached Dr. Parchman of his daughter's intentions, he became infuriated and rushed out the door to stop them from boarding the morning train, lest he never see his daughter again. While Charles Tolson stood at the ticket window of the train depot, the doctor raced down Main Street on his horse-drawn carriage. Tolson was purchasing tickets departing Van Buren on the next train out. But before he could board the train, Dr. Parchman drew his pistol and shot the young actor 3 times, missing him with the first bullet, piercing his pocket watch with the second, and finally striking him in the back as he turned to flee. Knowing the King Opera House was the last theater in which the young man had performed, some believe that his ghost still resides there, roaming the hallways of the dressing rooms and the stage where he spent the last moments of his life. Of course, there are the naysayers who refuse to believe in such tales. They scoff at the idea that this spirit, tormented by the acquittal of his cold-blooded murderer and robbed of the embrace of his true love, would reside in the Opera House, searching among the audience members for just one more look at the face of the beautiful young girl his restless heart so passionately desires. As for me, well, I suppose there's no true way to tell.